The video started like many others that appear on social media every day. A few seconds of shaky camera movement, a faint sound of traffic in the background, and a young man in worn-out clothes kneeling on the pavement beside an old street vendor. The old man's eyes were full of tears as the young man handed him a small bag of food, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, and whispered something no one could quite hear. It was such a simple scene, but it struck a chord with everyone who watched it. Within hours, the clip spread everywhere on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. People shared it with captions like "Faith in Humanity," "Restored," and "This is what kindness looks like." Strangers around the world commented on how beautiful it was to see someone care so deeply for another person. News channels picked up the story and started calling him the boy with the golden heart. Some even tried to track him down for interviews. For a while, it felt like everyone online was united in admiration for that moment. The young man's calm expression, his soft tone, and the way he hugged the old vendor looked so genuine that people couldn't help but be moved. It was rare to see something real in a world filled with filters and fake smiles. But what no one saw was what happened before the camera started recording. What no one knew was that behind that act of kindness was a long, painful story that the world had never heard. He never planned to be in a viral video. That day he had simply been walking home after finishing a long shift. His shoes were worn, and his hands were rough from work. He wasn't thinking about being filmed or seen. His thoughts were heavy, lost somewhere between exhaustion and memories he wished he could forget. As he walked through the market street, he saw the old vendor sitting alone under a faded umbrella. The man looked tired, as if the weight of life had pressed him down for too long. His small stand of roasted corn wasn't attracting many customers. Most people passed by, eyes on their phones, pretending not to notice. The young man stopped for a moment and just watched. Something about the man's face reminded him of someone he once loved deeply, someone who was gone. He walked closer, not out of pity, but out of a quiet pull in his heart. When he reached the stand, the old man looked up and forced a smile. His hands trembled as he tried to light the small stove, but the match kept going out. Without saying anything, the young man knelt down to help him. The vendor's eyes filled with tears. It wasn't just about the help, it was about being seen, being treated with kindness in a world that often ignored people like him. What happened next was instinctive. The young man took off his jacket and placed it over the old man's shoulders, even though the air wasn't too cold. He bought 2 corns, gave one to the old man, and sat beside him on the pavement. They didn't talk much. Sometimes silence speaks more than words. That was the moment a passerby began recording. When the young man noticed someone pointing a phone at them, he looked up but didn't say anything. He wasn't angry or proud. He just nodded slightly and went back to the conversation. Later, he would admit that he didn't think much of it. To him, it was just another moment of human connection, something small but meaningful. By the time he got home that evening, his phone had started to buzz nonstop. Friends were sending him links and screenshots. His face was all over social media. People were calling him the boy with the kind eyes and a hero. He was shocked. He didn't feel like a hero. He hadn't done anything special, at least not in his mind. For a while, the attention felt strange but harmless. Strangers sent him messages thanking him for reminding them that good people still existed. Someone even started a fundraising campaign in his name, saying they wanted to support a kind soul. But the young man didn't want money. He didn't even reply to most of the messages. He just kept doing what he always did, working hard, helping when he could, and keeping his pain to himself. Deep down, the truth was that the moment that touched the world came from a place of quiet sorrow. The old vendor reminded him of his late father, who used to sell fruit on the roadside when times were hard. He remembered watching his father work under the sun, pretending not to feel tired, pretending not to be hungry so his children could eat. Those memories never left him. When he lost his father, something inside him changed. He learned to survive, but the sadness stayed. That's why when he saw the vendor that day, something in him broke. It wasn't planned. It wasn't performance. It was emotion. It was grief, kindness, and love all mixed together in a few seconds that someone happened to capture on camera. As the days went by, the video's numbers kept rising. 10 million views. 20 million. More and more people wanted to know his name, his story, his life. Journalists tried to contact him, some even showing up at his workplace. He avoided them, embarrassed by the attention. He didn't want his private life exposed. He didn't want people to know about the nights he went to bed hungry, or the dreams he had to bury to take care of his younger siblings. For him, the world's sudden fascination felt strange. People were praising him for one kind act, but they didn't know that there were many others that no one had ever seen. He often helped neighbors, shared food with hungry children, or stayed late after work to help a struggling coworker. These were not things he did for approval. They were simply who he was. One evening, while scrolling through the endless comments under the viral post, he came across a message that stopped him. It said, "You never know what someone is going through. Sometimes the ones who give the most have the least." That single comment brought tears to his eyes. It was the only one that felt close to the truth. He sat on his bed staring at the screen, thinking about how quickly life could change. A single moment, one act of kindness had turned his life upside down. People were calling him lucky, but he didn't feel lucky. He still woke up early every morning to catch the bus to work. He still counted coins before buying food. Fame had given him attention, not comfort. The funny thing was, everyone thought they knew him after seeing that short clip. They made assumptions, created stories, and even called him an inspiration. Yet no one asked what led him there. What kind of pain shaped that moment of kindness? One afternoon, as he walked through the same market again, a young woman recognized him and asked for a photo. He smiled politely and agreed. After she left, he stood there quietly, staring at the spot where the old vendor used to sit. The stand was gone. He had heard that the vendor had moved to another part of town. For a few seconds, the noise of the market faded, and all he could hear was the echo of that day, the match that wouldn't light, the trembling hands, the quiet thank you that had broken his heart. He realized then that fame was fleeting, but compassion was not. People might forget the video one day, but that moment between two strangers would always stay with him. That night, he lay awake thinking about how a single act had been magnified by millions of eyes. Everyone saw the smile, the hug, the gesture. No one saw the struggle before it, or the tears that came after. In the following weeks, he kept his distance from social media. The attention was too much. Some people started spreading rumors, saying he did it for publicity, while others defended him fiercely. The internet was unpredictable. One day it lifted you up, the next it tore you down. He tried not to let it affect him, but sometimes it did. He couldn't help but feel misunderstood. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just a person trying to do what felt right. But deep inside, he also knew something good had come out of it. The video had inspired others. People started sharing stories of their own acts of kindness, food drives, donations, small gestures. Many said they were moved by that clip. That thought brought him peace. He understood that maybe this was the purpose of that moment, not to make him famous, but to remind people that humanity still existed. Even if no one ever learned his full story, it didn't matter. The message had already reached hearts around the world. Still, when he looked at the video, he couldn't help but feel a quiet sadness. To everyone else, it was a beautiful scene of compassion. To him, it was a memory of loss, of love, of everything that shaped him into who he was. And so, while the world celebrated the viral video, he carried the truth silently within him, a truth that no camera could ever capture. He never liked talking about his past, not because he was ashamed, but because it carried too much pain. People saw the kindness in him, but few ever asked where it came from. They only saw the surface, the quiet young man who worked hard and helped others. They didn't know that behind that calm face was a long story, filled with struggle, sacrifice, and a kind of loneliness that shaped his heart in ways even he didn't fully understand. He had grown up in a small, crowded neighborhood where life was always a battle. His father was a street fruit seller who left the house before sunrise and came back after dark, hands rough and feet swollen. His mother used to sew clothes for neighbors to earn a few extra coins. They never had much, but somehow they managed to smile through the little they had. When he was a child, he didn't realize how poor they were. He thought everyone's house leaked when it rained and everyone's dinner was just rice with salt or lentils. What he remembered most was his father's laughter. No matter how tired his father was, he always found a way to make everyone laugh. He would walk in with a basket of leftover fruit, drop it on the table, and joke that they were having a feast fit for kings. But things changed quickly. His father fell sick one winter, and the illness never left him. The medicine was expensive and the doctor visits became more frequent. He was just a teenager when he first realized what fear felt like, the fear of losing someone who meant everything. His father's condition worsened each month. The fruit cart stopped rolling out. The laughter stopped echoing through the small house. The family began borrowing money, selling whatever they could to keep him alive. His mother's hands became rough from sewing late into the night. The young man, still in school at that time, started skipping classes to work odd jobs, cleaning, carrying boxes, anything that brought home a little cash. There were nights when he sat quietly beside his father's bed, pretending to be strong. His father would tell him stories of people who never gave up, people who stayed kind even when the world turned hard. Those stories became his lessons that would later define who he became. But one evening, the story ended too soon. His father passed away quietly while everyone else slept. The young man was the first to wake up and realize it. That moment changed him forever. It felt like the world had suddenly gone silent. From that day on, he carried a heavy sense of responsibility. He left school and started working full-time to support his mother and younger siblings. He didn't complain, not once. But deep inside, a part of him always missed the laughter that used to fill their home. Every time he saw an old man working on the street, he thought of his father, how life had taken him too early, how people had walked past his fruit stand without noticing the pain in his tired smile. Years passed, and though he grew stronger on the outside, the softness inside him never faded. It became his greatest strength and his deepest wound. He learned to hide his pain behind small acts of kindness. If he saw someone struggling, he couldn't walk away. Helping others made him feel close to his father again, as if each act of goodness was a quiet conversation with the man who taught him to be kind. But kindness doesn't fill empty stomachs or pay overdue rent. There were days when he barely had enough for himself. He often skipped meals so his siblings could eat. Sometimes, when his mother noticed, she'd scold him gently, but he'd laugh and say he wasn't hungry. He didn't want her to worry. Even then, he never stopped giving what little he had. He would save a few coins to buy snacks for children in the neighborhood, or help an elderly neighbor fix a broken door. People often told him he had a big heart, but he never believed it. To him, it was just normal to care. Over time, he started working at a construction site. It was tough, exhausting work, but it paid enough to keep his family afloat. Every morning, he woke up before sunrise, washed his face with cold water, and walked miles to the site. By the end of the day, his back ached and his hands were covered with dust and cuts. Yet he always managed to greet people with a smile. One of his coworkers once asked him how he stayed so calm and kind despite everything. He had simply shrugged and said, "Because anger never builds anything." It was something his father used to say, and repeating it made him feel like his father's spirit still lived inside him. There was one moment that stayed with him for years. It happened on a rainy evening when he was about 20. He had just finished work and was waiting for a bus when he saw a small child sitting on the sidewalk, crying beside a woman who looked too weak to stand. They had been selling flowers and the rain had ruined them all. The woman was holding her stomach, clearly in pain. Without thinking, he ran to a nearby stall, bought a cup of tea and some bread, and gave it to them. He stayed with them until they were okay. That night, as he walked home drenched in rain, he realized something simple but powerful. Helping others gave him peace that nothing else could. It didn't fix his life, but it made the world feel a little less cold. So when the day of the viral video came, it wasn't a random act. It was part of who he had always been. The kindness everyone saw in that clip wasn't born out of fame. It was born out of pain, love, and memory. But even before the video, he had faced countless moments that could have broken him. There were times when people mocked him for being too soft, saying kindness wouldn't get him anywhere. Some coworkers laughed when he gave part of his lunch to a stray dog. Others called him foolish for helping strangers when he barely had enough for himself. He never argued. He just smiled and carried on. Deep down, he knew that the world had lost touch with compassion. People had become so focused on their own struggles that they forgot how much a small act of kindness could mean. He often told himself that even if the world didn't notice, he would keep doing his part quietly. But what he didn't realize was that his quiet acts were slowly shaping his destiny. Every moment of selflessness, every small decision to help was leading up to that one day, the day when the camera caught what his heart had been doing all along. He often thought about how strange life was. One second you're invisible, walking through the world unseen, and the next millions of eyes are watching you. Yet the people watching only see a glimpse, never the full story. Sometimes, he wished he could tell the world everything, to explain how the pain of losing his father shaped him, how every act of kindness was a way of keeping that love alive. But he didn't know where to start, and he wasn't sure anyone would really listen. What he didn't know yet was that fate had already started writing a new chapter for him. The viral video would soon open doors he never imagined. Some would bring hope, others would bring pressure. But for now, in the quiet moments between work and sleep, he was just a man trying to live a decent life, guided by a heart that still believed in goodness. He didn't see himself as special. He didn't think of himself as a hero. He was simply someone who had felt the weight of pain and chose not to pass it on. And though the world now saw him as the kind stranger, he still saw himself as a son who missed his father, a brother trying to hold his family together, and a man learning how to carry his past without letting it break him. It was a bright afternoon, one of those days that started ordinary, but ended up changing everything. The air was warm, and the market streets were alive with noise. Vendors were calling out their prices, children were running around with snacks in their hands, and the smell of roasted corn mixed with dust and car fumes. The young man had just finished work for the day. His back hurt, his clothes were covered in cement dust, and his stomach growled from hunger. He was tired but used to it. Every day felt more or less the same. Work, bus, home, repeat. He didn't expect anything to be different about that day. As he walked through the narrow lane near the market, he heard someone coughing behind a food cart. He turned and saw an old man struggling to light a small stove. His hands were shaking badly and the flame kept dying. The man's clothes were old and torn and his eyes looked weak. He was trying to roast corn, but the fire wouldn't start. At first, the young man just stood there watching. Something about that scene tugged at him. Maybe the way the old man reminded him of his father, or maybe just the look of helplessness in those tired eyes. People were walking past, pretending not to notice. Some even looked away, as if the man's struggle made them uncomfortable. Without thinking too much, the young man walked over. "Let me help," he said softly. The old man looked up, surprised. No one had stopped before. The young man took the matchbox and tried a few times until the fire finally caught. The vendor smiled weakly, whispering a quiet thank you. The young man noticed the small basket beside the stall. It was almost empty. Maybe only 2 corns left. He reached into his pocket and took out the few coins he had earned that day. He handed them to the old man and said, "Give me both." The old man tried to refuse, saying he could buy just one, but the young man insisted. "You need to eat too," he said. Then he sat down right there on the pavement beside the old man. They didn't talk much. They just shared the corn and sat together in silence. The old man kept wiping his eyes every few minutes, whispering things under his breath that the young man couldn't quite hear. That was when someone walking by noticed them. A young woman holding a phone in her hand slowed down and started recording. She captured the moment where the young man smiled and put his hand on the old man's shoulder. It was just a few seconds of video. Nothing fancy, no editing, no music. But those few seconds were filled with something people rarely see anymore. Real emotion. After finishing his corn, the young man helped the old vendor pack up. Before leaving, he took off his jacket and placed it gently over the man's shoulders. "It might get cold later," he said. The old man didn't reply, just nodded with tears in his eyes. The young man smiled, said goodbye, and walked away, never realizing that someone had just captured everything. By the time he reached home that evening, his phone was buzzing nonstop. At first, he thought it was just work messages. But when he opened one of the links his friend sent, he froze. There he was, sitting beside the old vendor, the jacket on his shoulders, the same smile, the same quiet moment. The video already had thousands of views, and the comments section was filled with people writing things like, "This made me cry, and we need more people like him." He didn't know what to feel. He wasn't angry, but he wasn't happy either. He hadn't done anything for attention. To him, it was just a normal act of kindness, something anyone should do. But by the next morning, the video had exploded. 10,000 views turned into 1,000,000. Then 2,000,000. News pages started sharing it, adding dramatic captions like, "The boy who gave hope back to humanity." It was strange watching himself become a story on everyone's screens. Strangers began calling him an angel, a hero, a role model, Some even made short edits of the video with soft music and quotes about kindness. At work, people started recognizing him. Some clapped when he walked in. Others teased him lightly, calling him the famous one. He laughed awkwardly and tried to brush it off. Inside, he felt confused. He hadn't saved a life or done something grand. All he did was sit with someone who looked lonely. But for the world, it was something extraordinary. The attention grew quickly. Journalists wanted interviews and social media influencers wanted to collaborate. He didn't respond to most of them. He didn't even know what to say. Whenever people praised him, he felt uneasy, almost guilty, because no one knew that the reason he helped that old vendor wasn't about kindness or charity. It was about memory. That moment reminded him too much of his father. The way the old man's hands shook, the way his voice cracked when he tried to speak. It all brought back flashes of his father sitting on the roadside with his fruit cart, coughing but still smiling. Helping the vendor wasn't a decision. It was instinct. It was grief disguised as kindness, but the world didn't know that. The world saw a video and built its own story around it. Within a week, his face was everywhere. Newspapers printed his photo with headlines about a man with a golden heart. Online blogs wrote about him as if they knew him personally. Some even made up details about his life that weren't true. One article said he was a college student who volunteered at shelters every weekend. Another said he was rich but humble. He couldn't recognize himself in any of it. One evening, as he scrolled through the comments, he noticed something that made him stop. Among thousands of people praising him, there were a few who started doubting his intentions. Some wrote, "This is fake," and he knew the camera was there. Others said he must have staged it to get attention. He felt his chest tighten. It was strange how quickly people could turn. The same world that praised him could also question him in an instant. He didn't respond, but the words stayed in his mind. That night he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. He thought about his father again, how he had taught him that kindness never needed to be explained. Maybe he shouldn't care what people thought. Maybe it didn't matter if they believed him or not, but still the noise of the internet was loud. Too loud. In the following days, he tried to live normally. He went back to work, helped his mother, and avoided talking about the video. But people wouldn't stop asking questions. Some coworkers wanted to know if he was going to use his fame to make money. Others told him to start a YouTube channel. Even strangers on the street would stop him and ask, "Hey, you're that guy from the video, right?" He would smile politely and nod, even when he wanted to be invisible. Fame wasn't what he wanted. It was something that happened to him. And with it came a pressure he never asked for. There was one moment that broke him quietly. A small group of teenagers approached him outside a shop one evening. One of them laughed and said, "Do that thing from the video again." The others started recording. He froze for a second, forced a small smile, and said softly, "That wasn't a performance." They didn't understand, just laughed and walked away. That night, he sat outside his house, staring at the dark sky. The stars looked distant, silent. He realized that the more the world saw him, the less they truly understood him. Everyone saw a moment of kindness, but no one saw the years of struggle behind it. Still, a part of him was grateful. If that video had made people a little kinder to each other, then maybe it was worth it. Maybe this was life's strange way of keeping his father's lessons alive. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know that the same fame that lifted him up would soon start to weigh him down. For now, he just wanted peace. A little space from the noise, a quiet corner of the world where he could still be himself, the man behind the viral smile. In the beginning, fame felt strange but harmless. It was like standing in a spotlight you didn't ask for, warm at first but too bright after a while. Every day, new messages flooded his phone. Some were from kind strangers who said his act had restored their faith in humanity. Others were from reporters wanting to know his life philosophy or asking for interviews. At first, he tried to respond politely. He thanked people for their kind words, said he was just doing what anyone should do. But as the days went on, it became overwhelming. His phone never stopped ringing. Even when he muted it, the notifications kept lighting up the screen. It felt like he couldn't escape it. Everywhere he went, someone recognized him. In the market, at the bus stop, even at work, people whispered, pointed, smiled. Most were kind, but some were curious in a way that made him uncomfortable. They wanted to know everything about him, where he lived, what he ate, who his family was. He didn't understand why strangers wanted so much from him. He wasn't a celebrity, just an ordinary man who had done something small. But now people expected him to keep doing more. Every time someone saw him, they had a camera ready, hoping he'd perform another moment of kindness for them to post online. At first, he tried to laugh it off. He told himself it would fade soon, but the attention only grew. Brands started reaching out, offering him money to appear in commercials or post about their products. One company wanted him to film a staged kindness video for their campaign. He refused, but they kept increasing the offer until he stopped replying altogether. His friends started teasing him too, saying things like, "You're famous now. You don't need to work here anymore." Some meant it as a joke, but others weren't joking. A few started treating him differently, some with jealousy, others with distance. Even his co-workers looked at him strangely, as if he no longer belonged among them. But the truth was, nothing in his life had really changed. He still took the same bus every morning. He still counted coins before buying groceries. Fame hadn't brought comfort, only attention. Then came the criticism. One evening, while scrolling through social media, he noticed a new wave of comments under the viral video. People had started questioning his intentions again. Some claimed the video was staged. Others said he was doing charity for clout. A few even created fake stories about him, calling him a scammer or accusing him of faking his humble background. He read each comment silently, his chest tightening with every cruel word. He wanted to explain that he had never wanted to be famous, that he didn't even know someone had filmed him, but he stopped himself. The internet didn't care about explanations. It only cared about stories, and once people decided what yours was, there was no changing their minds. He stopped checking his phone for a few days after that, but even when he tried to ignore it, the world around him wouldn't let him forget. Every time someone mentioned the video, it brought back the weight he was trying to escape. His mother noticed his silence. One night as they sat for dinner, she asked softly, "Is something bothering you?" He forced a smile and said no, but she could tell. A mother always can. She reached across the table and held his hand. "Don't let other people's noise drown your peace," she whispered. He nodded, but the truth was his peace had already started to fade. At work, he found it harder to focus. People treated him like he was special, yet somehow he felt lonelier than ever. The more they talked about him, the less he felt like himself. He missed being invisible. He missed the quiet moments when no one expected anything from him. One afternoon, while sitting alone during his lunch break, a co-worker approached him with a phone in hand. "Can you help me film something?" the man asked. "Just a short clip. You hand me some food and I'll post it with a message about helping others. It'll go viral for sure." The young man froze. He didn't want to embarrass the co-worker, so he smiled politely and said, "I'm sorry. I don't do things for the camera." The man laughed and walked away, muttering, "Guess he only helps when he knows someone's recording." Those words stung more than he expected. After that day, something inside him began to shift. He stopped walking through the busy streets where he might be recognized. He avoided eye contact with strangers. He even started leaving for work earlier and coming home later just to avoid people. But isolation came with its own kind of pain. The more he pulled away, the heavier his thoughts became. The silence that once brought peace now felt suffocating. He started questioning everything. His choices, his purpose, even his kindness. Had he done something wrong? Had his small act really deserved all this noise? The world had built him up as a symbol of hope, but he didn't feel hopeful anymore. He felt like a character in someone else's story, trapped in a version of himself that wasn't real. Everyone wanted the smiling, kind-hearted young man from the video, not the tired, anxious person who was slowly falling apart inside. He didn't tell anyone about the anxiety that kept him awake at night. He didn't tell them about the way he stared at his phone screen, watching the same video play over and over, wondering how a few seconds could change a person's life so completely. One night, unable to sleep, he walked outside. The streets were quiet. The air was cool, and the faint sound of distant traffic echoed through the night. He sat on the same bench where he used to rest after work, long before the video happened. For a moment, he closed his eyes and tried to remember what life felt like before all of this, before the cameras, the comments, the attention. Back then, life had been hard, but it was real. People didn't know his name. but at least he knew who he was. Now even that felt blurry. He opened his eyes and saw a stray dog limping nearby. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small piece of bread, and tossed it toward the dog. The animal wagged its tail, ate quietly, and lay down near his feet. Watching it, the young man felt something he hadn't felt in weeks: peace. It was a small reminder that kindness didn't need an audience, that maybe he could still be himself, even if the world had turned his life into a spectacle. But the calm didn't last long. The next morning, his photo appeared in another newspaper. Someone had spotted him feeding the dog and posted it online with a caption calling him the man who can't stop helping. It was meant as praise, but it only made him feel trapped again. He realized there was no escaping the image people had built of him. Every move he made, every kind act would be watched, shared, and judged. He wasn't angry at anyone. He understood that people needed hope, that they wanted to believe in good. But it hurt knowing they didn't really see him. They saw an idea, a story they could share to make themselves feel better about the world. And so he started withdrawing even more. He stopped checking his messages, stopped smiling for photos, stopped responding to journalists. His fame faded slowly like a candle burning out, but instead of relief, he felt empty. For a long time, he wondered if kindness was worth it at all. If helping people only brought him pain, maybe it was better to stay quiet, to stay unseen. But deep down, he knew he could never stop caring. It was who he was, no matter how much it hurt. Still, the silence began to grow heavy. His heart, once filled with compassion and hope, now carried exhaustion. The same world that lifted him up was already moving on to the next viral story, and he was left behind, a ghost of the person they once celebrated. But life, in its quiet way, was preparing him for something else, something that would finally bring the truth out, the truth he had been holding inside for too long. Days turned into weeks, and the noise around him slowly faded. The internet had found new stories to love, new people to celebrate. His face still appeared in some old posts, but no one talked about him anymore. What once felt like a storm of attention was now just a memory. But even though the world had moved on, the silence inside him remained. He went back to his old routine, waking early, going to work, returning home late. Life looked the same on the outside, but something inside him had changed. The weight of what had happened, the love, the hate, the confusion, still lingered. One evening, he sat by the window, looking out at the street below. He watched people rushing home, headlights glowing in the drizzle. For a moment, he thought about how strange it was that one small act could change everything. He hadn't asked for attention, yet it had rewritten his life. His mother walked into the room quietly. She placed a cup of tea beside him and said, "You've been quiet for a long time." He nodded. "It's easier this way." She looked at him carefully. "You were never made to hide," she said softly. "Your heart was meant to be seen, but not for their applause, for what's real." Her words stayed with him long after she left the room. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the moment everything began, the small act of kindness that someone had recorded. He remembered the look on the stranger's face, the gratitude in their eyes. It had been real, pure, but somewhere along the way, that truth had been buried under filters, captions, and endless opinions. The world had seen the moment, but not the story behind it. And maybe, he thought, that was his fault too, for staying silent while others shaped his truth. So the next morning, he did something he hadn't done in months. He turned on his phone, opened his social media, and stared at the blank post box. His hands trembled a little as he typed. He began simply, "I never wanted to go viral. I never wanted to be famous." He paused, then kept writing. "I did what I did because it felt right in that moment. It wasn't for a camera or for attention. Someone filmed it without me knowing, and suddenly the world decided I was something special. But I'm not. I'm just a person. One who tries, fails, learns, and sometimes helps when he can." He hesitated, unsure if he should continue. But then he thought about all the people who might be out there, those who felt unseen, those afraid to do good because of judgment, and he wrote more. Being called a hero felt nice for a while, but when the same people started calling me fake, it broke something inside me. I realized that the world will love you one day and forget you the next. So if you ever do something kind, do it for yourself, not for the noise. The moment itself is enough. He ended it simply. Kindness doesn't need an audience. It just needs a heart. He read the post twice before pressing share. Then he put the phone down and stepped outside. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter. He walked without worrying if someone would recognize him. The streets were the same as they had always been, loud, crowded, alive, but this time he felt a strange calm in the middle of it all. When he returned home later that night, his phone was full again. But this time it wasn't chaos. It was quiet kindness. Hundreds of messages from strangers saying thank you, not for the viral video, but for his honesty. One message read, "I was afraid to help someone because I thought people would judge me. After reading your post, I don't care anymore, thank you." He smiled quietly. For the first time, the attention didn't feel heavy. It felt human. He didn't reply to every message. He didn't make any more posts either. But something had shifted inside him. He no longer felt trapped by what happened. Instead, he accepted it as part of his story, a story that wasn't perfect, but real. Months passed. The world forgot his name, but that was okay. He didn't need it to remember. He went back to his normal life, but his heart carried a gentleness that hadn't been there before. He started volunteering at a small shelter nearby. No one there cared about his past or his viral fame. They just worked side by side, helping whoever came through the door. One afternoon, as he was serving food, a young boy tugged on his sleeve and asked, "Are you the man from the video?" He froze for a second, then nodded with a small smile. The boy grinned. "My teacher showed it to us in class. She said kindness can change the world." He looked at the boy, unsure how to respond. Then he simply said, "Your teacher's right. But the world changes only if we don't stop being kind." The boy smiled again and ran back to his mother. Watching them go, he felt something warm spread through him, a quiet, steady peace that had nothing to do with fame or praise. That night, when he walked home, the sky was filled with stars. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel small beneath them. He felt grateful that the chaos had led him back to something true. He finally understood what his mother meant when she said his heart was meant to be seen for what's real. Because in the end, it wasn't the viral video that defined him. It wasn't the millions of views, the comments, or the interviews. It was the moment that no one recorded. The quiet acts that no one noticed. The gentle choices that didn't need to be shared to matter. He had spent so long trying to escape the shadow of that one filmed moment that he almost forgot the beauty of life beyond the camera. Now, as he stood outside his small home, watching the neighborhood lights flicker in the distance, he whispered a simple truth to himself. Kindness was never about being seen, it was about seeing others. And for the first time since it all began, he felt free. Months later, someone stumbled upon his post again. It began to circulate quietly, nothing viral, nothing loud, just shared between people who needed the reminder. One comment under it simply said, "This story reminds me that real goodness doesn't fade. It just finds new ways to shine." And somewhere out there, the young man went on living a quiet, gentle life, helping when he could, not for the world, but for the peace it brought him inside. Because sometimes, the most beautiful stories aren't the ones that go viral. They're the ones that stay tucked inside the hearts of those who truly understand. Sometimes life changes in ways we never expect. One small act, one passing moment, can open a door to the world. A door that not everyone is ready to walk through. The young man never wanted fame, never wanted attention. All he ever wanted was to do something right in a quiet corner of his life. But when the world noticed, it also misunderstood him. People saw a symbol instead of a soul. They turned a simple moment of kindness into a story, forgetting that real kindness doesn't belong to headlines, it belongs to hearts. And yet, through all the noise, Through all the confusion, he found something stronger than fame. He found truth. He found peace. He learned that sometimes the greatest thing you can do is not to be seen, but to keep giving, to keep caring, even when no one's watching. Because kindness isn't about how many people applaud you. It's about how deeply it changes you. In the end, he didn't fade away. He simply went back to being what he always was, a quiet reminder that even in a world full of cameras, the most powerful moments still happen off-screen. Maybe that's the real message behind his story. Not the viral clip, not the millions of views, but the simple truth that being good is enough. Even when no one sees it, and maybe, just maybe, that's what makes kindness so beautiful. Time moved on, as it always does. The city that once buzzed with his name forgot. The news cycles turned, and the people who once followed his every step now followed someone else. But he didn't mind. In the silence that remained, he began to live again. Slowly, quietly, and on his own terms. Every morning, he walked to work through the same narrow streets where it had all started. The shopkeepers still waved to him, but now their greetings were simple and real. They didn't talk about fame anymore. They talked about the weather, about food, about life, and that felt better than any kind of recognition. He started noticing the small things again. The smell of fresh bread from the corner bakery, the sound of children playing after school, the sunlight spilling through the cracks in the old buildings. These were the things he had missed when his life had been lost in the noise of the internet. One day, while walking home, he passed by the same spot where that first viral moment had happened. It looked ordinary again. No cameras, no crowd, just an empty sidewalk. But as he stood there, a faint smile appeared on his face. It was strange to think that this quiet place had once been the center of the world's attention. He didn't resent it anymore. He just understood it differently. What had felt like a burden before now felt like a lesson, a reminder that even a single act could ripple far beyond what one person might ever see. That night, he wrote in a small notebook he had started keeping. It wasn't for posting online or sharing with anyone. It was just for him. He wrote, "Kindness isn't loud. It's quiet, patient, and invisible, but it always leaves a mark, even if the world forgets." Over time, that notebook filled with small reflections, thoughts, and observations. It became his way of staying connected to the world, not through fame, but through meaning. He wrote about the people he met, the smiles he noticed, the little things that made life worth living. Sometimes he would visit the local park on weekends. There was a bench near the fountain where he liked to sit. Children ran around chasing pigeons, old men played chess, and couples shared food under the trees. It was simple, peaceful, and real. The kind of beauty that didn't need to be shared online to exist. One afternoon, a young woman approached him while he sat there. She looked a little nervous, holding her phone awkwardly. "Excuse me," she said, "I think I know you. You're the man from that old video, right?" He smiled gently. "Yes, I suppose I am. That was a long time ago." She nodded, hesitating before speaking again. "I just wanted to say thank you. That video, it helped me during a hard time. It made me believe there were still good people in the world." He looked at her, surprised. So much time had passed that he had assumed no one remembered. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'm glad it helped." She smiled, took a small step back, and said, "I won't take your picture or anything. I just wanted to say that in person." Then she walked away. He sat there for a while after she left, watching the water ripple in the fountain. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the ache of his past and only gratitude. It was a small encounter, but it reminded him that the world wasn't all noise. Some people had truly seen his heart, even through all the chaos. That night, he wrote another line in his notebook. "Maybe the purpose of that moment wasn't to change my life, but to remind me what really matters." As months turned into a year, his life found a new rhythm. He continued volunteering at the shelter. He helped repair things around the neighborhood. Sometimes, when no one was watching, he'd leave small notes of encouragement on park benches or slip coins into vending machines for the next person to find. He didn't want credit or thanks, and just the quiet joy of knowing someone's day might be a little brighter. Every now and then, people still mentioned the video, but instead of shrinking away, he smiled. He had made peace with it. That moment didn't belong to the internet anymore. It belonged to him. He had learned something precious. that even when the world twists your story, your truth remains yours to hold. One rainy evening, while he was cleaning up the shelter, an older man sat beside him and said, "You know, I saw your video years ago. Back then, I didn't believe in good people, but you made me rethink that. You helped me start again." The young man looked at him speechless. All he could do was nod. After the man left, he sat quietly, listening to the sound of rain tapping against the window. A strange warmth filled his chest, not pride but peace. It was the kind of peace that comes when you realize that even small actions, long forgotten by most, can keep echoing quietly in other people's lives. Later that night, he opened his notebook one last time and wrote, "The world forgets fast, but kindness doesn't fade. It just travels unseen from one heart to another." He closed the notebook gently and set it on his desk. Then he turned off the light and sat by the window again, looking out at the rain-soaked streets. The city shimmered under the soft glow of the streetlights. Somewhere out there, new stories were beginning. New moments were unfolding, some loud, some quiet, but all connected in ways no one could ever fully understand. He smiled to himself, whispering, "Let them record, let them forget. I'll keep living in the moments they don't see." And in that quiet apartment, filled with the soft hum of the world outside, he felt something he hadn't felt since before it all began. A gentle happiness, the kind that doesn't depend on anyone else's eyes. He had come full circle. He was no longer the man from the viral video. He was just himself again. Simple, kind, and real. And maybe that was the truest ending of all, because sometimes the most powerful stories don't end with applause or recognition. They end with peace, the kind that comes when you learn that being good, even unseen, is enough.